Today we're going to continue in the wisdom of Solomon, the collection of the Proverbs. He must have been quite the man. As we considered in the last topic, he talked about life and how to attain to the blessings of life, and really having the sense of knowing that you are blessed. Well, today we're going to the other extreme, to those who potentially could be blessed, who would have all the same means available to them to be blessed, but aren't. The sluggard. The sluggard. The sluggard is a unique kind of foolish man. There's different kinds of fools. There's the scoffer. But the sluggard, again, he has all the same potential as everybody else. He has all the same opportunities potentially right before him. I think about Solomon, I think he was an overachiever in a way. Because you think, it seems he had a near limitless drive to determine what he wanted and go after it and get it. He was a great builder of Israel, and certainly he finished what he began. He's an overachiever in that even as a younger man, he knew what he wanted, and he determined to get for himself more and more of all the riches he wanted, and he got it. But he was an overachiever who then came to the point where he found no satisfaction in all that he had obtained. So then what did he do? Started all over again. Sort of like a late in life career change. Start all over again. And what did he determine? I'm going to obtain something else. And by the collection of the Proverbs, you'd have to say again, he finished it. He's kind of an overachiever. But on the other hand, then some folks are chronically underachievers. And again, the problem's not lack of ability, not lack of opportunity. It's just the lack of gumption to just get up and go. The sluggard is the one that variously described as just being lazy, sluggish. Some translations would say slothful. Some would just call him stupid. And it's not a problem with IQ. It's that he's stupidly wasting the opportunities that are available to every man. He's wasting the opportunities to accomplish good, just throwing away, in a sense, every avenue by which he could obtain life and that sense of a spiritual blessed life, just throwing it away. There's three basic problems with a sluggard. He doesn't start things, he won't finish things, and he won't face things. And they work interchangeably. Sometimes he'll never start something because he won't face the challenges of planning it and preparing to do it. Sometimes he won't finish things because, again, he won't face things because as soon as there's a bump in the road, that's just too much to overcome. He won't start, won't finish, won't face problems. Number one problem, he just won't begin. This takes us to Proverbs chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, which comes right after that passage about talking about the ant who is, the ant we could describe as being overachievers, but Proverbs chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. Unlike the previous example, how long will you lie down, O sluggard? And when will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Anything wrong with any of that? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding? Not a thing wrong with it. But the sluggard is like the guy that gets into a really, really comfortable bed. Cozy, thick comforts over you. Feels so good. He can get into it real easy. Just getting him out's the problem. Just getting him up. That's the problem. Often the hardest part about making changes or accomplishing good is what? Just the start. Just the motivation to start. Overcoming, whatever the need may be, overcoming whatever the present condition is, overcoming the status quo requires the motivation to get up and go. Some people don't. Perpetual procrastinators are, in a sense, sluggards. Why? None of us want to be called a sluggard. None of us want to be called lazy. So we use the word procrastinator. And I'm talking about somebody that does it all the time. It just sounds nicer, doesn't it? But as they make all their excuses for never beginning, that's the same thing. Yes, Carol?
I'm a procrastinator by nature. And so I have to really work on it. So I have to work harder to overcome and get started because that's my natural tendency to overcome.
But you've taken what you know about yourself and your determination to correct it, and you get it done. We see as we go through these verses about the sluggard, he won't do that. I'm just who I am. If I actually went to the trouble to do something, and actually the sluggard winds up being quite an angry individual because they won't do what you do, know that's who I am, and know I need to overcome that and do it. Nothing wrong with being that way if you do something about it. Yep.
Well, Judy changed everything.
Yeah.
I couldn't cut corners, I couldn't put anything off, I had to be on top of everything, had to always be on my mind, I had to pay the paperwork, tons of paperwork, it's just, but in the long run, it was the best thing that could have happened.
Now, if I take your example, Carol, if you just say, well, that's just who I am, and every day it was another excuse. Well, you got to admit that's ultimately just being lazy. But you're not. You've worked beyond it. Again, that's one of the three problems with the sluggard. He won't face things. You faced that tendency and overcame it. Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I've always been, let's do something even if it's wrong, because if it's wrong, somebody will straighten you out or look figure it out. That makes you successful because you're not afraid to start. I've got something, I don't have a clue, but
just jump in and with both feet. You may have to jump out if you jump in too quick, but well, and
applies to a lot of things. I used to ask them, we'd be fishing and you're out there in the middle of the ocean, well, let's do something even if it's wrong. Make glue, and you make something happen. My landscaping projects are up there. I don't have a clue how to landscape that.
Now that wasn't your boat that sank in the bay, was it?
No, it's really, I lucked out that day. I had to go camping.
On the other hand, if by chance this person finds the gumption to begin, well, the second problem is they won't finish what they begin. Look at Proverbs 12, verse 27. This ties to so many things we read in other places in Scripture. You start something, but you haven't counted the cost. You haven't adequately prepared. You don't have the gumption to finish the course. Proverbs 12 and verse 27. This one ought to ring a bell with all you hunters around here. A lazy man does not roast his prey, but the precious possession of a man is diligence. You got a contrast here. One guy, here's the guy who's had the opportunity to go hunt. He's had the means, he had the ability, he actually was successful. He shot the elk. Still going hungry, isn't he, Jeff? Doesn't have the follow through. He's not going to take it home and roast it. And on the other hand, you've got this wiser man, diligent man, to follow through. He's going to cook what he's caught. He's going to have good life, isn't he, Gary? We talk about having life in the last talk. Enjoy the blessings of life. He's going to cook it. The follow through. Didn't do any good to go out there and take it if you're not going to cook it. Well, look at all the blessings that are missed by that. Yes, Tony?
Well, and also, to me, a sluggard could be in two different categories. One is, what if you enjoy something immensely, but it's not beneficial, it's a hobby? You know, and you're gonna carry that all the way out because you love doing it. But something that you don't really wanna do, but you know you have to me, that would be a sluggard, definitely, you know, but I think it's in two different ways also.
Yeah, and we're going to see that in the passages we consider today. Oh, he's more than happy to do what he wants to do.
Exactly.
But if it's what he needs to do to provide for himself, come on, I don't want to do that, you know. And it's, it really is two different categories. And so one of them hunted and took his prey. He never gets around to cooking. What's the benefit? Look at Proverbs 19 and verse 24. There's a little progression here. This one apparently has maybe even cooked the food, but when he sits down to eat it, look what happens. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish, but will not even bring it back to his mouth. He just fell asleep in his plate, didn't he? You know, he probably didn't cook it either. Somebody else is providing some food and he goes, that's pretty sad. I have never been known to do that. I've got enough motivation, obviously, to bring it back to my mouth, but I've got the gumption to take a bite. Look at Proverbs 26 and verse 15. This is interesting. It's the exact same proverb with the exception of adding one word. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He is weary of bringing it to his mouth. He hadn't changed, has he? Hadn't changed. Not going to change. Just too much trouble. Pardon? Yeah, that's about it. Just, you know. Yes, dear.
Verse just before it, number 14, it says, as the door turns on its hinges, so does the sluggard on his bed.
And that's pretty much what Martha just said. Just chasing his tail, rolling over again. No purpose. He can roll around in his bed all he wants, but he's never going to get out of it is the problem. And so apparently he's not doing anything to change. Well, while all these things are left unfinished, what's the benefit? I mean, we just talked about that topic of life. By applying oneself and attaining what is good to attain, there's all this spiritual blessing, this sense of blessedness. What's the benefit in this? There's not any. All that was available, all that effort that was extended, all of that's wasted. Yes, Joe?
Well, you think about why do we do what we do? Why are we doing it? We can be super busy and get a lot accomplished and everything like Solomon did, or we can be the sluggard. The bottom line is we're doing it for the glory of God, to show His, to us as His agents. Whatever we do is for the glory of God. It doesn't make any difference whether we're over busy or under busy or whatever. It still applies to why are you doing it.
It is all about potential, isn't it? Opportunity and potential. How many of us ever got one of those notes on our report card? Oh, your child shows so much potential. Yeah, I think I heard about you getting that on your report card. Yeah, so much potential. Ability, opportunity to do good, but just
It changes your perspective. Because when I became a Christian, it changed how I thought, how I did things, why I was doing what I was doing.
there's an innate motivation then that changes, isn't it? Because it's not just about you. It's not just providing for you. It's providing in a way that reflects favorably on God. Well, the sluggard first doesn't begin. The second problem, he doesn't finish. The third problem is, if we continue from the last one, he fell asleep in his plate, or he won't even put it to his mouth. And then when he falls asleep, he leaves this big mess on the table. There's a big mess. All the dirty dishes are left in the sink, so to speak. Is he going to clean it? Oh, who wants to face that mess? Instead, he won't face the problem. And there's all kinds of excuses for it. I mean, he has the ability, he has the opportunity to provide for himself, to get to work, but in Proverbs 22, in verse 13, we see the excuses. Yeah. Proverbs 22 and verse 13. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the streets. He doesn't even want to get out of the bed, much less go outside. But so how do you figure that? Well, it's danger outside. Too dangerous. Not trying to be excessively flippant about it, but there's greater chance of being struck by lightning than being eaten by a lion in the street. But it really doesn't matter. It's just excuses not to go to work and not to provide for oneself. And again, as Tony alluded to earlier, there's two kinds of sluggard. This guy would go out and he'd go out in the street if it was something he really wanted to do, wouldn't he? But it's too dangerous to go out in the street to work. Sometimes to vary my routine here, I'll go down and work some days at the library. It's interesting to watch. Every time I've been there, there's a young man that comes in, about noontime. I don't know what he's done all morning. I know he doesn't work. And he comes in the afternoon and he logs onto one of the computers and puts on the headset. And he sits there for 3 or 4 hours laughing at YouTube videos. See, he'll get out and do that, but not work. That's what you were alluding to, Tony. That's the real sluggard. It's not being willing to face the challenges, like Carol mentioned, of overcoming one's procrastination, to overcome one's laziness. You're just content to continue in that way. It's the same in Proverbs 26 and verse 16. Now, somebody alluded to the guy's attitude earlier. Notice how this works. Despite being lazy and stupid, he thinks he's the smartest one around. Proverbs 26 and verse 16. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can give a discreet answer. 7 men who, by experience, would have complete knowledge and a solution to this problem. Can you imagine men coming to him? Now listen, I know you got this problem, Jeff, but here's the answer. If you do it just like this. You see, the sluggard could learn something from the wise man who applied himself and is greatly benefiting from it. But does you want to hear it? How many times have you given advice to some people and given it again and again and again and again, and they don't want to hear it? And they really think that they're wiser than competent, trustworthy men whose solutions to problems prove the wisdom in it. When you cut through the excuse, I'm glad you mentioned it earlier, Jill, because this is not just the world. This has to do with God, doesn't it? It has to do with our service even in the kingdom. When you cut through all the excuses, it's just easier not to make the effort. It's easier not to plow the hard ground. Look at Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 4. It's easier not to plow when it's time to plow. Proverbs 20 verse 4, the sluggard does not plow after the autumn, and so he begs during the harvest and has nothing. What's the picture? Well, he may have gotten up and actually planted something in the planting season, but now it's time to harvest. He won't even go out there and turn the row to pick up the potatoes. Will he? So when it's time to labor, the time for the harvest, he's going to be left wanting simply because he wouldn't turn the row. So there's all this opportunity, all this potential blessing laying right there in the ground, but won't take it. How many potential blessings do we have in the Lord that we don't receive because, despite knowing it's there, we won't dig deep enough to find it? It's a tragedy in a spiritual sense. But it's just easier not to make the effort. He does not work when it's time to work, but he still expects to receive the benefit. That's a sad condition, isn't it? The able person who lacks motivation and foolishly reasons he deserves to be supported. Now, I'm not talking about the people who are not able. I'm not talking about people who truthfully can. But those who are able and just won't and expect, gimme. No. He lacks the planning. He lacks the discipline. He lacks the personal accountability of not providing for himself. Well, what's the result of all of this? The result of not beginning, not finishing, not facing the challenges. What's the result in the person? It turns out that the person is even more restless in their demand to be provided for and thinking they deserve to be. It made me think of years past when I was a few times involved in trying to take care of some benevolence need. And I bet some of you men and women too have found this. The meanest people I've run into is someone that won't work but is sure that we owe to support them. They can be pretty nasty about it. That what you give is not enough. Inside the church, outside of the church. One case happened here just a few years back. One man came in and felt like we owed him something and we were ready to help him. And while he was standing here, he was complaining against the brethren in the church. Remember that one, Gary? Remember that? Mean. There's that restlessness due to an unsatisfied desire. He craves but gets nothing. Look at Proverbs 13 and verse 4. Verse 4. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, but the soul of the diligent is made fat. So one is satisfied, one is contentious. And you wouldn't be able to provide enough for him to be able to satisfy him. Yeah?
Because you can be a friend that would be really enthusiastic about starting a new project. And then I ended up finishing it. And then she had, like you're talking about the restless feet, she was busy. But then she's like on her sixth marriage. And then her one she's married to now got diagnosed with cancer. And she says, everybody tells me to be strong. What does that mean? I said, it means you stick with that. You stick with it. You finish it.
Yep.
Being strong means to stick with it.
And again, just for her benefit? No. For the other person's benefit, for God's benefit?
All that
That's,
goes together.
yeah.
But that, when you're in like you're saying, into that type of living, they're not ever seem to be happy until there's a new project or something.
And the new project is really just a distraction from the restlessness. Are they ever going to be satisfied? Some people are just not. Yeah.
And also the restlessness to me is because of what's inside of you. You are not satisfied with the spiritual side, even though you might not agree to that. But that's the restlessness, because our job here is to serve Christ. That's what we're constantly fighting against that with the world and all that. So it becomes a spiritual battle, and that's the restlessness. That's why you keep doing all these things, and because you're trying to fill a hole that you're not filling because you're not serving the Lord.
You know, in several of these proverbs, Solomon has contrasted the sluggard to the diligent man. Talking about two different attitudes. One is a taker and a user and is never satisfied. One is a doer and is a giver and is perfectly satisfied. Who is it that is satisfied in this life? The takers or the givers? Yes, sir.
The Lord says in Matthew 20:28, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom. So he came to serve, and he was worthy of worship.
And the one most deserving to be ministered to didn't demand it, oh, he wasn't the taker, he wasn't the user, he was the giver. And perfectly willing to do so. Started to say delighted. Well, he still had to suffer a lot, but you know, in the eternal scheme of things, yes, he was delighted to do so. Who is it that is really prospering? In Proverbs 21, verses 25 through 26. You know, I think about this. If Solomon was originally writing this for his own sons, can you imagine them? Hey, we're the king's sons. What do we have to do? We can depend on dad's riches. Solomon's writing this to Rehoboam. Was Rehoboam ever satisfied? No. But Proverbs 21, verse 25 through 26. The desire of the sluggard puts him to death, for his hands refuse to work. All day long he is craving, while the righteous gives and does not hold back. Same principle. Who is it that is blessed? Puts him to death, not literally, but he's as good as dead. Doesn't have any more joy than if he were dead. But who's the one increasing in joy? The one who's giving of himself. And how much does he give? Does not hold back. The stingy one is never satisfied. The giver,
The giver considers it a privilege to give.
yeah.
And the sluggard figures he needs the privilege. He deserves that, even though he's done nothing to warrant it.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
I mean, Solomon has described the righteous, the one who is diligent and righteous. That is to him the gift of life, to give it away. It's, again, whether we're talking about in the world or in the church, it's true, isn't it? Who's going to be blessed? It's yes, Joe.
I think one thing that, I don't want to speak for myself, but I think a lot of us struggle with, for example, say, 10% do 90% of the work. And so we have to be careful, whatever we are, if we're the ones that are the 10%, that we don't get the attitude that, well, I'm doing this and nobody else is, and I'm doing this and nobody else, and I'm doing, well, who are we doing it? Once again, who are we doing it for? Are we doing it for the Lord, or are we doing it to get recognized by the man? So we have to be,
And having that attitude, that's not the one that Solomon says is blessed, is it?
no.
He says the righteous who are diligent, without reservation, he said. They're not measuring that, are they?
No.
Without limit.
And like, just be thankful that you're able to do it. Be thankful. I got a statement yesterday, because the blade wasn't working, but it was working good enough. And I thank God, because I'm thankful that I'm still able to do the things that I had before. It may take me longer, but it's that attitude change. That
And-
attitude.
And the attitude, in fact, causes the sluggard to focus on the problems that get in, supposed problems that would prevent him from finishing. Proverbs 15, verse 19. The sluggard sees any obstacle at all is too difficult to overcome, or at least an excuse not to overcome. And how's it described here? Proverbs 15 and 19. The way of the lazy is a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. He's actually built this fake hedge of protection around him. I can't get over that, and it's thorny. It'd be hard to get over. It'd be painful to get past that problem. What's the way to prosperity oftentimes? You got to go through the pain. You got to clear the hedge of the thorns. Sometimes you got to cut it down. But he sees everything as a hindrance. But for one who's motivated to work, it's smooth comparatively. Now, we know it's not a smooth highway, but what's the difference between the two? One is focused on the chug holes in the highway, and the other is focused on the destination.
You know, also, when you have somebody that knows they have to work because there's just not any other way, they complain the whole time. They constantly complain about having to work. And they don't do as good as job because the people around them are hearing their complaining and stuff. So there are people that still have to be out there doing stuff, but they're complaining takes away their blessings from God because of the way that they're acting.
Yeah, it's the what he's talked about in relation. They would prefer to be lazy,
Right.
and it's that restlessness. As Solomon described it, they crave, but get nothing and complain. Well, they're getting a wage just like everybody else, but they're getting no satisfaction out of it because of the complaining about it. It's all about attitude. It's a smooth highway if I'm focused on the end of the trip. Now, it's going to be some tough slogging between there at times, but the worker's fixed on the reward at the end. This reminded me of a situation when I was at Bear Valley in school, and there was a man that came to preach in chapel one day, and if you looked at him, you would say this man has every legitimate reason not to work a day in his life, to expect to be cared for all the time. He would have reason to be bitter because of his circumstances, severely deformed, continually bound in a wheelchair, lots of other handicaps and obstacles in his lives beside that. He was a preacher from a very dangerous part of the island of the Dominican Republic. And you would think, okay, this guy, circumstances are just so set against him. He was the most fired up, happy, serving, giving person that I can describe. Absolutely delighted to day by day be dealing with the struggles of getting from point A to point B with his twisted body and all the contraptions that had to get him there, and just get to wherever he could to preach the gospel. Perfectly satisfied by it. Happy as could be. But we would tend to look at him as like, okay, if we really got to take care of somebody, this would be it. He didn't want anybody to take care of him that way. Why? God was taking care of him. And it's an amazing to see that in somebody, to see the benefits of working. But on the other hand, to the sluggard, Proverbs 10 and verse 26. This goes to what you were describing, Tony, and the complaint of the worker. Proverbs 10 verse 26. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy one to those who send him. He's been sent on a job to do. He knows what is expected. He has the ability to do it. Ew. Yeah. There's not a sweet word comes off of his teeth, is there? And they just can't, they won't, in a sense, won't let themselves see the benefits of the work. We got just a couple of minutes. Is there a solution to all this? Is there a solution to all this? We can go full circle back to where we began this morning in Proverbs chapter 6. We began in chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. If you go just before that, you go to that example of the ant. The ant in the nest is, each one of them is sent on a work to do. They all know their work. It's a relentless work. They need no overseer. They're self-motivated. The ant is the kind of creature that knows no rest until the work is done. And then a little folding of hands, a little time for slumber. That's good. In some ways, it's why most preachers take off Monday, I take off Friday, because I want to get the work done first in case I need the Friday. Then I can really enjoy the Friday. But the wise man is alert to the needs of the future, and alert to the potential, alert to the ability to attain. But what's going to happen to the sluggard when he comes to the pantry and it's empty? Going to be shocked by it. It gets back to the character of the ants. It's just their nature to work. Just their nature. The ants don't really get a choice. We do, don't we? We all got a choice. Yes, Tom?
But you know, in the wildlife, if there is an animal that doesn't hold up to its end, most of the time the other animals will kill it. You know, so it's still no choice, because one way or another you're going to either do the work with us or you're going to die. You know, they get rid of the weak.
That's right.
In one sense, the hard work as you go along will save one a whole lot of work later. Proverbs 12 and verse 24. I mean, if you get to the point where you haven't done anything all along and nobody's going to let you draw from their harvest, you come to the pantry and it's empty, there's a time you get a little desperate. Proverbs 12 verse 24. The hand of the diligent will rule. I mean, they're self-controlled life and well provided. But the slack hand will be put to forced labor. Sooner or later, he's got to get it done or die. When's the best time to go to work? For whatever needs to get done.
Get it done.
Best time to begin. I once saw a quote that I've always loved. If you want a shade tree, the best time to have planted is 20 years ago. Next best time to plant it's today. If you ever expect to have shade, plant it today. The best time to get to work is today. It's better to do it as you go along, but if you wait till the last minute, then this person is robbed of any possibility of being content. What if we wait too late to do the things spiritually that needs to be done? The work that needs to be done to become the kind of people that are really glorifying to God. You come to a point where you really can't move fast enough to get it done. Look at Proverbs 24, verse 30 and 31. Then we'll wrap it up here. Proverbs 24, verse 30 and 31.
Got that part in Africa, the safari, and I've got a book about it. It says, lions, or maybe sluggards, but those guys get rid of the doggone creature when they're in snow, when they are slugging around or any herds or anything. They'll get the weak out real quick. And then they will go and eat it.
Let me go on here to Proverbs 24, verse 30. The wise man. I passed by the field of the sluggard and by the vineyard of the man lacking sense. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Well, the wise man does what about that? He reflects upon it. How much harder? Here's the sluggard who's let the field go to ruin. And he comes to it expecting a harvest. How long is it going to take to get that vineyard back in shape to produce a harvest? You going to get it the first year?
Years.
I don't know, what, 5, 6, 7 years before you get a harvest at it?
10.
So when's the best time to go to work? 5, 6 years ago. And to kept it all along the way. Spiritually speaking, when's the best time for us to work to keep our lives in order? When should I have started? Long time ago. How often should I apply myself to the work? Today, tomorrow. Did you have something?
Just real quick, I was just thinking that everything that we have comes from God, right? Right.
Amen.
So that can be our house, our yard, whatever. And how should we take care of it? And that once again goes back to, the Lord bless me with this, and I'm going to show them honor by taking it.
Life, ability, potential, all of it comes from God. It's the attitude we receive it with and how we apply ourselves to attaining what He has in store for us. Yeah. Good information. Certainly wise if we apply it to our own lives.